Welcome to another episode of the Armchair Crew Chief. My name is Jordan, and we had just finished off an historic race at Iowa. First time Cup Series has ever been there, and it's been a while since the Xfinity Series was there. So let's go ahead and get into the racing here and kind of go over how everything ended up. Starting off with the Xfinity race. Our top five qualifying were Sam Mayer, Justin Allgaier, Sheldon Creed, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Austin Hill. So SVG's out there showing that, he can run some ovals. Now, this track posed some questions in how everything worked out because of their repave they did. They only did a repave, and it was like the bottom lane and the middle lane in the turns only. So you had everything else was pretty much original except for that area. And it raised some questions for some people and how everything turned out. But going on, stage one, top five, Sammy Smith, Justin Allgaier, Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Chandler Smith. Stage two, Sammy Smith, Corey Heim, Ross Chastain, Sam Mayer, Chandler Smith. And then getting into the end of the race, but just looking over everything, the Xfinity Series racing there, we did have a total of 12 lead changes throughout this race, and then we moved into quite a few cautions. We take two out for what happened, or for the cause for cautions, the end of the stages. And you're looking at a total of 7. But then again, some of these incidences that happened prematurely into the stage. And we had AJ Allmendinger in on lap 35, all the way down to John Hunter Nemechek. Fluid on the track. Austin Hill got into some stuff. SVG got into it with Kyle Weatherman, Blaine Perkins. So overall, it was a interesting race to watch, and how that handled. It kind of turned into a slight tire management race. So going into the end of this race, and we'll kind of cover a little bit more information about it. Our top five were Sheldon Creed, Sammy Smith, Corey Heim, Riley Herbst, and winning the race was Sam Mayer. This is his second of the season and 6th of his career. And everything coming in within the last 29 races of his career. It ended up going into overtime, and Riley Herbst and Sam Mayer fought coming off the start of everything, and Mayer just cleared him on turn 2 and just held it. And some people were saying this racing was tough to do, just with people were afraid of just that single groove, and some people were able to make the higher groove work. Unfortunately, you had people like, Chandler Smith, who he led the most, 131 laps, and took both stages, as we talked about. But he restarted third, and he just couldn't go. His lack of short run speed was there, and it hurt him bad. And then you had other people. Handling issues was the big thing. I mean, we were talking about that. They were talking about that in Cup Series as well. Handling issues was the big issue. Austin Hill finished 29th. He had issues with his handling, hit the wall after he cut a tire, and it made it rough. SVG finished 34th. He got loose into turn 2 and suffered damage that just he DNF'd with contact with Blaine Perkins and Kyle Weatherman, as we were talking about. So it was one of those races that you had a lot of loose cars. You had a lot of people cutting tires, and just you had to manage your tires. I don't know if you want to call it similar to what happened with Bristol, but moving on with the Cup Series, this was their first time ever racing at this track, and it was very loose during practice. Some people, I think Christopher Bell had to go to a backup car, and you had a whole bunch of people just sitting there, just loose. They couldn't get the grip, and there was a varying differences with, it rained there as well with the handling, and that kind of postponed some things. And so it posed an issue, posed more of an interesting take on things. So going into it, qualifying, our top 5 for qualifying: Brad Keselowski, William Byron, Josh Berry, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson. Our stage 1 in, we had Josh Berry, William Byron, Daniel Suarez, Kyle Larson, and Ryan Blaney. Stage 2 was Bubba Wallace, Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, Josh Berry, Kyle Larson. So with this race, you had a lot of people. I know, like, we listen to Truex, obviously, but a lot of people were saying they were getting really loose and they were having a hard time with this track. Like, they couldn't get their car tight enough. I know that was a Truex issue and some of these other guys. And then we had other people cutting tires. Kyle Larson made a move that a lot of people, I think it was split. When he talked about it, he was kind of split in his mind, but he understood the reasoning why he probably shouldn't have. So he went in between Daniel Suarez, and I can't remember who was on the top groove, but he tried to split and go 3 wide and split through them. And Larson had a really fast car, so he was kind of marching back up to the front, and he tried to thread the needle, go through, and start marching forward. Well, excuse me, he got Suarez loose and bumped into him and wrecked him, and it didn't end his day, but it made it a lot harder. And he, afterwards said, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I had a fast car. I could have just waited. But he's like, I want to get to the front as fast as possible. So I think that was an issue there. Going through Byron had a strong car. He was kind of running through, then you had a couple of these other guys. Stenhouse did well. Logano, Berry, Bowman, Suarez. Suarez came back up. Keselowski, they all finished top 10. So going into our top 10, so we don't keep going more, our top 5 were Ricky Stenhouse, Christopher Bell, Chase Elliott, William Byron, and Ryan Blaney. Won the race. Got his win this year to put him back into the playoffs. We have, I think it's 11 different winners now in the Cup Series. So they're starting to dwindle. Martin Truex Jr. is still the first one on points, but I mean, goodness, we still have enough races to get more than 16 winners, and I think it would be interesting if we did, because you have too many people like an NBC that go out there and they say, oh, they're locked in the playoffs. They're not locked in the playoffs. I hate that we still use that terminology, because if it goes down to, we have 17 winners, 18 winners, 2 of these people are not making it to the playoffs, and it's going to go based on points. So we have to pay attention to that, and some of this doesn't jive, and it doesn't run out too well. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Can we get a repeat winner? Truex opened up as the favorite for New Hampshire, where we're going this weekend, and it's one of those that it's, what can we do? How can we handle it? And are we going to see it? I'd like to see it. I think it would be interesting to see what goes on. It's one of those things where we have it open. We usually have a lot of multiple winners. I think it makes it fun to watch and see different winners. Yeah, we've had multiple winners this year, but just to see other people playing there. I mean, Cindric, I'm not a big fan of Cindric. I think there's better people to go in that car, and he's gotten lucky. He got lucky with his one win at Daytona, his first win. That's a luck track. As much as it's a cool track to go to, it's one of those that you better hope that towards the end of the race you're in the lead, because the big one's going to happen and you might finish. And then he got lucky his win this year when Blaney ran out of fuel. So I think it's a good redemption for Blaney to come back here and win this race. We'll see what happens going forward. He had a really strong car. Byron was catching up to him. I don't know if he would have caught him. I mean, they were getting close, but not close enough where it could have contended. And it was mostly close because of traffic. So I would like to see what happens going forward there with that. And, it's one of those that it's, I don't know how to put it. It was a great race. It was interesting. Some of it was kind of dull, but you did have some jockeying. It wasn't, you had some guys go out to a huge lead. Larson went out to a huge lead to the end of stage 1, and that got kind of annoying. I don't like that, but it happens, and you just got to live with it. But it's one of those that, it's tough. I believe it was Kyle Busch wrecked, and he wasn't able to come back in. So just to give you an idea, we had 17 lead changes throughout this whole race, and we had a total of 8 cautions. LaJoy, Zane Smith, it was Spire Motorsports got into an accident in turn 2, lap 5. AJ Allmendinger got into an accident. Ty Gibbs got into it. Then we ended the stage. And then we had Noah Gragson, John Hunter Nemechek, Ty Gibbs got into it. Michael McDowell, Daniel Hemrick into stage 2. And then we had Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Daniel Suarez. So there you go. I think maybe it was Busch on top. I don't know. But I know Busch was involved in one of these, and he ended up just putting the car in the garage and just calling it. And he's had a rough year. Rumor has it he might be moving over to Joe Gibbs, maybe get out of his contract with RCR. I think RC, I don't know if how well he can handle this stuff. It seems like he's just letting it ride with his grandson. Let him prove me wrong. So that's the end of that race. A lot of people were loose. And you had some of the guys, you had some you expected. Hendrick go up there. But then, like Gibbs, they kind of iffy on this. And so it was, I don't know how else to put it. It was more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Let's put it that way, this race. I thought it was going to be a snoozer. I thought it was going to be boring. I didn't like the fact that it was a 7 o'clock race on a Sunday. What happened to Saturday night races like, the Bristol night race and so on. Or if there's a holiday. Because, I can hear some people say, well, Coke 600's on at night. It's like, yeah, but you have a major holiday, so most people are off anyway on Monday. So it's almost like racing on a Saturday. So that's one of those things that I was kind of curious about with Iowa. Iowa's in the central time zone, so, you're sitting there playing with the different... it moves it more towards, the West Coast, that they're not having to stay up so late. But I don't know. They're kind of used to it. It's kind of like the NFL schedules. So, it made it interesting. Again, William Byron finished 0.716 seconds behind Blaney, and Chase Elliott finished 2 seconds. So they were sitting there charging. Seabell, I think he was just hanging along for the ride. And, our next Toyotas that came up were Truex at 15th. He came back with that one after he had his pit road speeding penalty. His lights weren't working well. But then again, I would think with him, after announcing retirement, I would have loved to see Joe Gibbs say, okay, well, we're going to give you as much equipment as we can so you can try and win this championship. Or at least, him and Denny fight for it. I know Christopher is in there as well. But I feel like Truex has got the short stick when it comes to some of these decisions when it comes to crews. So I would have liked to see something change there. I don't know what will happen going forward. We had no issues on post-race for both races. So Blaney won. No cars are going back to R&D Center, but the 9, 47, 20, 23, 6, and 22 are going back to the wind tunnel testing, see how it fared out. And this is one of those things. I think it was Seabell when he blew the tire during practice and he had to go to backup. They were like, well, he practiced and he's still having issues. So this track was better than some people thought. I'd like to hear what Dale Jr. says about it, because he was one of the big ones that said, why are we repaving this or botching, quote-unquote, botching the repave. He didn't really say that, but just, for lack of a better term, not repaving the whole thing is what it came down to. So that's your race there at Iowa. Moving on to... Well, let's go ahead and cover some news here. We have some news going on. I think it's Ream Brothers, how you say this. Frankie Muniz is going to be running 3 truck races this year, which I think is great. he hasn't done so much racing for the Xfinity Series. It's been hit or miss, and since ARCA, hasn't been running too much ARCA either. So he's going to be running the number 22 at Nashville Friday. Is going to be his next race, and then I'm trying to see if they come up and bring any more information. Craftsman Truck Series Nashville, Bristol, Kansas, and then he's going to do one ARCA race at Michigan. And Josh Ream came out, and he pretty much said he's the owner of Ream Brothers. He's looking forward to welcoming well-known face to the team. He's quoted in saying, Frankie brings a very unique opportunity to our race team, both relationships with Ford Performance and his identity from the racetrack, away from the racetrack. We are excited to expand our relationship with Ford and also leverage on Frankie's popularity to attract partnerships and expand our racing schedule over time. I think it would be cool to sit there and see him run more races and see what happens with that. I think he's obviously a big name in the outside world. Everybody knows Malcolm in the Middle, but I want to see him more racing. I mean, we saw the ARCA racing that he used to do. He did last year. He was decent, and I'd like to see what he can do more than just a few races in Xfinity or a few races in Truck Series. Give him a full ride somewhere. And do I think he's a big time, for Cup Series? No. I don't think he's there yet. Maybe, but we'll see what happens going forward with that. Other news, Daniel Suarez, sworn in U.S. citizen. Congratulations, Daniel. It's a big feat. Very proud of it. I know a lot of people are proud of you doing that. I think it's fun and exciting, to see that. I don't know you personally, so I can't say too much, but that's kind of cool to see you do that, and it's awesome. And congratulations once again. We have, Justin Haley is, with the silly season going on, Justin Haley says he's committed to the Rick Ware Racing. So we'll see what happens with that one and how that'll play out. We have, so many open cars. And speaking of that open charter, we thought we had, 3 open charters because of Front Row Motorsports buying one. We actually only have 2 because Gene Haas says he's going to be making a Haas factory team where he's going to keep 1 Cup car and he's going to run 2 Xfinity cars. No news on people or sponsors for this race or for these races, for these cars. Right now he's got Custer and Herbst down in Xfinity, and then Preece, Gregson, Barry, and Briscoe in the cars and Cup. So we'll see what happens going forward. Keep our ears to the ground on that one. And then Alan Day is going to be running the Chicago Street Race. Not really sure. Name sounds familiar. But he's going to be running for Alpha Prime. He's Israel's only professional NASCAR race driver and 4-time Euro NASCAR champion. And so pretty interesting. It'd be kind of cool to see what happens. He's going to be running the 45 for Xfinity and see what happens with that one. I think that's kind of cool. I like seeing some of these road courses and seeing these people bring in these ringers and see how they can handle it. Poor Boris said he couldn't handle it anymore. I don't know if it's just he's getting older and just can't do it or what. I don't know. So another one, Josh Bilicki, MBM. He's going to be running the 66 Chicago Street Race. And, that's that's a big one. Big different things going on there. We have a couple sponsor information celebrating 100 years. Kimberly Clark, Kroger, they're going to be celebrating 100 years of Kleenex at New Hampshire. Point standings, as we were talking about. So number 11 is our first person not on wins. He's 61 points from the regular season. And let's see if he can get a win. That's Truex. And you got Chastain, Gibbs, Bowman, Buescher, Wallace. Those are your guys non-win and on points. Chase Elliott's leading the regular season right now, which I find is very interesting. He's quietly come up and moved into that regular season. So it'll be interesting to see how that battle, because we're only looking at Like Truex is 61 points. Then you have a couple, Larson's up there with them, Denny Hamlin's close, and I don't know. Then you got a lot of these guys that if we end up getting more than 16 winners, like I was mentioning, that are going to be hurting. Suarez, 352. I mean, these guys are not going to be, they're like 18th if they didn't have a win. So that changes things, and that's both of them, 352, 327. That is crazy. Excuse me, they're actually lower than that. You have, 20th and 21st. I spoke off on that. Truex 530, no wins. He's sitting there fourth, it looks like, in regular season, and he doesn't have a win yet, and he's sitting there hanging. It's the same thing with Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott's got one win, and he's got 591 points. He's kind of taken a pretty dominating lead. He's almost 10 points above Larson, who's second. So that's just something to keep an eye on. Again, I'd love to see more than 16 winners because I want to see this stake up and see how people can handle this in their brain because we've had this conversation before and nothing really came up from it. So it'll be interesting to actually have the conversation for real. Latest NASCAR updates on charter negotiations. A couple of these teams are saying that this is the worst charter contract, if you want to call it that, that's been put out, worst offer yet. And then you have some of these teams that said, I thought we were going to be a unified body. They're coming out and like Front Row buying another one and buying another charter and going from there. And it's like, I thought we were going to be a unified body, and people are kind of worried that with Front Row doing that, they're going to be like, oh, we're going to go ahead and sign the deal. We'll see what happens going forward with that one. It's tough to tell. They're going to have to get something going. They don't want to start their own racing league. They want to say that they believe NASCAR would move on without Hendrick, Gibbs, or Penske if they decided to boycott the races. But I don't know how much they'll do that because they're going to lose a lot of people there. I mean, you have a lot of Hendrick people. I mean, and then so much tied up with Hendrick and NASCAR as well. I mean, they're the ones with the Garage 56. They took over Martinsville in the spring for their race 40th anniversary stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I can kind of see it, but I'm leaning towards that's kind of poppycock. So that's something to look out for, see what happens with that and how everything's handled. And we're still moving on, still trucking. We have our next race. So this weekend we have the Xfinity Series and Cup Series back at it. They're at New Hampshire, and we have a modified tour running. So let's go on to it. So today, Friday, we have at 4:05 Eastern the practice. It's going to be on USA. 4:35 is qualifying for Xfinity on USA, and then we have Whelen modified practice and qualifying during the day to bookend Xfinity practice. Then moving on to Cup Series, Saturday, 12:35 Eastern is going to be our practice. At 1:20 is our qualifying. These are going to be on USA, PRN, and SiriusXM with the simulcast. Then we move on to 3:30 Eastern is the SciAps 200 on USA, PRN with SiriusXM. That is the Xfinity race at 3:30. Then the Whelen modified race at 6:30. That is not on TV. That will be on Flow Racing, Mohegan Sun 100. Then Sunday is the big race, 2:30 Eastern. Doesn't make sense. We're running 3 o'clock on Fox, and we get to NBC, and we're running 7 o'clock and 2:30, or an hour early. So it'll be. I don't know. I don't know how I like this. I like the uniformity and the consistency, but moving forward, it's on USA, so we'll probably see some 2:30 races. Cup Series, USA Today 3:01 will be on USA Network, PRN, and SiriusXM with the simulcast, streaming on NBC Sports Plus, 2:30 Eastern on Sunday. As I said, Truex is opened up as the odds favorite for this race. And, I don't know. We'll see what happens with that one and go from there. I like to put my money on that, but Denny did well, and I remember back a couple years ago when New Hampshire had it, and it rained in turn 1 and 2, and Truex and Busch were running away with the race, and then they slid because they're calling rain and nobody called it. And then you have a comment come from Burton. Oh, NASCAR has people positioned at 4 corners of the track saying if it's going to rain or not. It's like, you're kind of silly on that one, I think. So that is our upcoming race for this weekend, New Hampshire. Then we move over to Nashville next weekend with the Chicago Street Race for the 4th of July weekend on the 7th, and then we hit Pocono. So we are starting to get in towards the ending of the racing here. We'll see what happens. I think one of the big ones going to be what happens at the street race. Nashville, I think, might be a snoozer, just the way it is. And we'll see what happens at New Hampshire, too. All right, everybody. I hope you guys have a great week, and we will catch you next time.